If you want to write an acceptable abstract, you'd better follow some models, one of which is presented or offered by Highland in 2000. He actually believes that if you want to write an acceptable abstract, you should include five parts or five sections, which he called five move. Then you have to include introduction at first, then purpose. Then you have to talk about your aim of the study, then methodology, methods and materials, and then product. The results of your research, and at the end, you should include a conclusion. He believes that you have to have five sections or five subsections put together to make it as a whole an abstract. And he believes that introduction establishes context of the paper and motivates the research or discussion. And in the second part or second subsection, you have to indicate purpose, our thesis or hypothesis, and talk about the intention behind doing the research. And at the middle section, in the middle section, in the methodology, you have to provide information with regard to procedures, data collection and data analysis, and specifications of the instruments you've used throughout the research and the approaches you've taken. And in the penultimate section, you have to talk about the results of the study, the major findings or main findings of or results, and at the end you have to include a conclusion which interprets and or extends result beyond the scope of the paper. It means that at the end you have to generalize your findings to a larger sample. And I believe that in addition to these five sections or subsections, you have to have another subsection at the end, which is called implications. You have to add a subsection here and talk about who will be able to use your findings and to what extent. For example, which part of industry will make use of your findings, and how your findings will influence the life of people or the environment, or for example fishing. I mean, you have to tell the readers that your findings will be useful for at least a part of society, and you'd better talk about that part of society and how much your findings will be influential. In addition to this model, which was proposed by Highland, we have other models. Actually, this is the model I discussed before. We have another model here, Badia, 1993. He argued that we have to have a four-move generic structure of the abstract, which includes purpose at first, then method, and then result, and then conclusion. Actually, he excluded two parts, one from the first introduction and one from the last, I mean, implications of the study. Maybe the reason was the date of proposing that actually idea, that model. Maybe at that time, the abstracts normally didn't have some sections like introduction and implication, but nowadays we think that it is necessary to include those two parts as well. And another model proposed by Schwelz and Fick, we know Schwelz because he proposed another model for writing introduction. We call it CARS model, create a research space. You know that. And Dos Santos 1996 and Schwelz and Fick 2004 proposed a model very similar to each other, which has five move generic structure of abstract, or which shows actually that an abstract has five moves, and they call those five moves or five subsections as background, aim, method, result, and conclusion. Although this model, the first model and the third model, Highland's model and the model at the end, have some actually words which are different. We have here introduction, but here background, here purpose, but here aim. But the words are different, but the intention or the logic behind the words are the same. here in the introduction section or in the background section, you have to briefly introduce the topic you're dealing with. And in the purpose section or the aim section, both of them actually deal with what was the logic behind doing the research. I mean, the logic behind the two parts, the two subsections are the same, but the wording here is different. Here introduction, here background, here purpose, here aim. Actually, they are somehow synonyms, and they actually connote or denote the same meanings, and we know them. But I believe that in the abstract section, specifically if we go back, we will have different types of sentences. And here in the abstract section, we are not actually forced to use the same tense. For example, in the introduction section, in the introduction or background subsection, we can use simple present or simple past, or in some cases, we might be able to use present perfect. But in the purpose section, we can use simple present and past simple past. But in the methodology section, we have to use simple past most of the time, simple past and passive sentences. In the product section, we can use simple present and actually simple past. And in the implication section, as I mentioned before, we can use future tense, I mean simple future tense. This tense shift from one sentence to the other is not actually is normal, and it is not a problem here if you change actually tense from this first sentence to the second to the third. And the share of these subsections depend on the actually clarity you want to bring to the readers. I mean, you can elaborate on the methodology section. You can talk more about the methodology section and less about the introduction, or less about the purpose of the study. For example, you can include only one sentence here for the purpose of the study, but you can actually dedicate a larger portion of words to the methodology. For example, you can actually dedicate 100 words to the methodology section, and the rest of the words, for example, the rest 100 words for all four or five sections, I mean remaining 4 or 5 sections. And it depends on you, and it depends on the policy of the journal, or the actually the preferences or the style of the editor-in-chief and the editorial board members and others. And if you want to be aware of the preferences, you'd better go and check the website of the journal, the publisher, first before writing your abstract, and decide how you want to organize your text based on the previously published papers by the same journal. And actually, it can be a good technique for you to foresee what will happen to you, or what will happen to your abstract or the rest of your paper. And you'd better do it, and then so that at the end you don't regret. Good luck.